Hi, I'm Zach with Rewild, Maine. We're here on colonized Wabanaki land, and we are looking at invasive bittersweet. We're here at the Eastern Prom, so-called Portland, Maine. The boat, and there's a bike path right there. This whole patch used to be covered in bittersweet. And I don't know if you can tell through the camera, but you can see that there's a variety of different plants that have taken over this area now. There's a lot of goldenrod, there's some more maple saplings and seedlings, there's some high bush cranberry, cramp bark over there. This is the first year that we've really had strong raspberries. I don't know if you can see this is maybe the last little red raspberry of the year. It's really exciting to see the proliferation of all these native plants when it used to all be bittersweet. This is what we're looking at. This is so-called Asian, or some people call it round leaf bittersweet because the leaf is much rounder than the native version. The Latin name is Silastris orbiculatus. And it's called Asian bittersweet because it's native to China, Japan, and Korea. It was brought here a long time ago, 1879. It was introduced to the east coast of colonized North America, Turtle Island, that was being overrun with all sorts of invasive species that were planted, just like this one was planted, of all reasons, for aesthetic value, because it's pretty. So this is like an immature berry. It's green now, and it's going to turn yellow and then pop open and have a red inside. It doesn't mature, the fruit doesn't mature until the fall, and when you see this stuff climbing up in a tree and see that flash of yellow and red in the autumn, it actually is really beautiful. Traditionally, the plant was used to make wreaths, which is now illegal. You can't use this plant to make wreaths anymore because due to improper disposal of these wreaths, the plant was spread far and wide. This is a plant that spreads readily by seed. The birds will eat it, but it also spreads underground through really strong creeping roots, and it spreads most of all through these creeping vines. And the invasive bittersweet actually outcompetes it. First of all, it readily hybridizes with American bittersweet, and it actually on its own, the invasive bittersweet will outcompete American bittersweet due to the length of the vine alone. Because this one puts so much into these long, lengthy vines, that's what makes it such a powerful invasive. The term invasive species, by the way, is relatively arbitrary, right? Not all plants that are from away are considered by the status quo to be invasive. It's an arbitrary distinction that we put on plants that are especially over-competitive of native plants. So the dandelion, for example, is naturalized, not invasive, it's naturalized around the world because you don't see a field of dandelion. It doesn't outcompete native plants, just have a few dandelions but bittersweet can take over the whole patch. And there are only so many ways, whether you're hearing it from some guy on YouTube or at the Common Ground Fair, or whether you're hearing it from a real official source on invasive plant species management. There's only 3 ways to kill a plant. You can dump chemicals on it, like glyphosate or tricloper, and these are at best mildly toxic, at worst very toxic herbicides that we don't want to use. They can cause damage to a lot more plants than just the targeted plants. They can linger in waterways, and they can cause damage to fish, which then can be consumed by mammals, including humans. So if you're not going to use chemical herbicide, you've only got 2 other options: remove the root or cut the green material until it dies. And in the case of a lot of these frustrating invasives like Japanese knotweed, it's difficult to remove the root. Invasive bittersweet, it's difficult to remove the root. And so what we're left with is, barring the use of herbicide, consistent cutting every year. We could talk about the idea of invasive species and have a whole discussion about what we consider an invasive species, when and why. But assuming that we do want to take responsibility for this patch of land, say, because we live here, because we're here now, this land was harmed through years of neglect, through people dumping these damaging invasive species here, and we're gonna take responsibility for it. We're not gonna necessarily anthropomorphize the plant and say, ugh, bittersweet. If anything, we might say, ugh, colonialism, yuck, industrialism, right? The thing that brought the plant here. But we're going to take responsibility for the plant, try to cut it as much as possible, and use it to make a basket. We could go on and on talking about the history of invasive species and what to do with them now that they're here. But let's just talk about managing bittersweet for basketry. Try to keep it simple, keep the focus small, and keep it manageable. So another reason that bittersweet outcompetes many plants is because it eats up sunlight. By spreading these vines, which have these big fat round leaves, you can see this whole mound of it, right? This is all bittersweet. We can cut this plant any time of year. And in contrast to a lot of other basket materials, this vine, you know, we just cut it at the base, strip all the leaves off if it's got leaves. A lot of other basket materials have to be cut, dried, and then soaked or rehydrated in order to make them bendy again. Bittersweet is bendy enough for baskets any time of year. To check if something bends, basically all we're looking for is a 90-degree bend, hopefully without too much bark breakage, and maintaining tensile strength. So once we bend it, there's a little hinge. Oops. So bittersweet's not an ideal basket material, but it is a usable basket material. And anytime I'm teaching people with it, I have to remind them that it's not willow, it's not grapevine, it's not the best basket material. It cracks a lot. And if you look at this basket, if you look at my sheath here, all of that brown tan is cracked, exposed bark, which means that this is not a perfect basket, right? It's a error. But that's okay, because it's still a strong, usable item. These baskets are so wicked strong, you could put a heavy load of rocks in here and it's gonna be fine. So the bittersweet basket is not about aesthetic perfection. It's about taking a frustrating, disliked material and making something really useful. So it's as bendy as it's gonna get 4 seasons of the year. I often like cutting bittersweet the most in the winter time because it's easy to see. All you have to do, you have to learn how to identify it without the leaves, and you can see that it's got these little tiny, I don't know if you can see those little tiny dots. So these long spindly vines with these little tiny dots are gonna look the same in the wintertime, except there's not gonna be any leaves on them. And I think it's easiest to gather in the wintertime, but if you really want to impede the plant's growth, it's best to cut it multiple times of the year. And it's really nice to cut it midsummer, like right about now. Because as we're cutting it, there's these immature fruits. So when you're cutting bittersweet, you want to be sure to not spread these fruits. You know, the only time of year that you want to be really careful about it is when the fruits are totally mature in the autumn. When the berries are ripe and the fruit is red. These are probably immature now. So I don't even know if this is going to make a seed. We're definitely not going to carry it out of the patch. So we're just going to strip all the fruits off and leave them here. Cutting this time of year has 2 benefits. One, we're taking away the plant's photosynthetic power by removing a lot of these shoots and stripping the leaves off. Now this plant has less power to make and produce these seeds. And the other thing we're doing is we're cutting the immature seeds before they have a chance to mature and ending their life cycle. We're gonna come back and visit this patch time and time again throughout the year. So wherever you're cutting, you wanna keep checking on your work, because if all we do is give this plant a haircut, sure, it's gonna sprout back. But if we come back, as I've been coming here probably at least 4 times a year for the past 4 years, we've freed the maple tree, we've given rise to all this goldenrod and raspberries and cranberries, and there is still a lot of bittersweet. The willows down there, there's still a lot of bittersweet. There's a lot of cutting to be done. And when I'm out here cutting the bittersweet, I'm just reminded of the challenges of rewilding. Right? What is rewilding? If anything, we're trying to take responsibility for the damage done. We're trying to undo the damage done by industrial civilization. We're trying to get back in touch with a connective way of life that was shared, albeit looked very different, depending on where your ancestry is from. If you go back far enough, all of us have a land-based connection, a time when we were tending the wild. And so trying to take responsibility for this patch and this park and this colonized town in this corner of the world feels really small. It feels like a lot of work, cutting and cutting. And this is all that it is just kind of cutting. I try to cut them as close to the ground as I can. And you try to keep them organized. And it feels like a lot of work. But we're seeing progress. We're making beautiful, useful things, and we're taking a little bit of responsibility, which is better than not taking any. And we're getting in touch with something that used to be so normal, so natural, right? Getting up in the morning and thinking, what does the land need? Like, what does this land that supports my life, what does it need from me today? Does it need me to go check on the fish in the river? Does it need me to go weed out the blueberry barrens? Does it need me to go take responsibility for the invasive species that was put here by my thoughtless ancestors? And just a little bit of that. It's not much, but it's you start where you are, you know, use what you have, and do what you can. We don't need that much to make a basket. It doesn't take that much to make a basket. So that's why I've been teaching these classes and trying to share it, because what the land really needs is for us all to do this all the time. And the basket's like the carrot. The basket is the motivator. So we're not going to remove this whole patch today. We're cutting gradually, and we're cutting as much as we can, and I'm going to cut enough to show you how to make a basket. So if you really have a lot of bittersweet to get rid of, you might want to bring some big loppers, bigger pruners than just this, or a machete. At this point, this patch is manageable enough that all that the bittersweet's really doing is making these shoots that can be cut with the pruners. But sometimes you'll come across this, which is basically this big dead stalk. It still has a lot of power in the root, so it's hard to rip it out, but it's not making any more shoots. You know, it's probably sending its power elsewhere. So again, you can use this material any time of year. You can come out here spring, summer, fall, winter. And in the dead of winter, this stuff is gonna be just as bendy. It doesn't dry well, it doesn't rehydrate well. So the thing to do really, if you're up for it, is to weave the basket right away. So the first thing to do is strip off the leaves. We don't have to do them all, we can just do it as we go. You're gonna start with 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You want these to be relatively the same thickness. It actually looks like 2 of these are a little thicker. So you could either get 2 new ones, or you could just pull it down because it's thicker at the bottom. So now we got 6 that are basically the same thickness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're gonna cut all these so that they're about 2 feet long. Separate them into 2 groups of 3 here. What we're gonna show you is, you know, among the most basic basketry forms, which is a simple twining. There's so many different types of ways to make a basket. Every human culture that's ever existed throughout history has had a type of basket or had some form of container making, whether it's weaving strips of animal skin or weaving pieces of grass or folding tree bark to make a container. Basketry is a universal human skill. What we're doing right now is the most basic form of stake-and-strand wicker work basketry. If you wanted to get more advanced, there would be a bunch of different ways to start a basket. One of the more advanced techniques would involve cutting a slit laterally through these three, putting these three in so that they're all already connected. You know, you could weave them, you could like cross-hatch weave them in, but what we're gonna do is use another one of these pieces of bittersweet to wrap around these two groups of three to tie them together. So to start, all we're gonna do is 1, 2, 3 in your hand and put the other three right on top. I like to have the ones on the bottom lined up with the thumb and the top ones go side to side. Before you start bending these, just practice. And the thing to notice is that it takes some care. Oops, it's easy to break them, right? So if you move quickly, you can just snap the twig. But if you take this same twig, and I like to put pressure at the breaking point, so I put my thumbs right where it's gonna bend, and I'm gonna squeeze and kind of ease into it. Whew. And you can make a total hinge without breaking the stick, right? That was another good bend. Slowly bend. So practice that a few times. Practice snapping it and breaking it, and then practice making a nice 90-degree bend without breaking it. Because the first thing that you're gonna have to do is take your skinniest piece of bittersweet that you can find, bend it in half 180 degrees. So this piece is pretty green, which is working fine. It would work fine with a brown piece too, as long as it's really thin. You can bend this 180 degrees without breaking it, just practice. So you've bent this piece in half, and you're gonna wrap it around the first bottom group of three that are furthest away from your body, and just wrap it around. Snug it up nice and tight and down to the center. So keep everything as close into the center of the basket as possible. So what's gonna happen is these weavers are going to switch places, make a little X. Every time they go around a group of three spokes, they're gonna switch places and make an X, and then bend and lock in and go on to the next group of three. So you wanna start by bringing the bottom one, bring it up on the inside of the other weaver and bend it down over the next group of three. Now you can bring this next one down and under the next group of three. And they make that really nice X in there. If you do this in reverse, if you try to bring the top one down first and under, can you see how it goes away into the center of the basket? Like there's nothing for it to bend around. Do you see that? So we need to bring the bottom one up first to make that little fence, that little thing for the one to bend around. Now, look at how snug that is, right? We've really got something to tighten up against. Then turn the whole thing. So always keep the working area out away from your hand. Don't let it get in close to your body or it'll get really confusing. So the pattern's gonna reverse. Now we're gonna take the top one down first. So make sure it's on the inside of the other weaver. It goes straight down and under the next group of three, and you pull it towards you. So now it's going in line with those other spokes. And this weaver, see, it went under 1, 2, 3. It went under those spokes. It's gonna come up, whoops, it broke, and over. So it did break a little bit, but this is what I love about bittersweet is you can make a decision. You know, right here, the plant matter broke, but the bark is holding up. And I'm just gonna keep going, try to pull a little more gently and not let things break like that. But you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't even have to be good. You do not have to crawl through the desert for 1,000 miles repenting, right? You just try to use this thing, train your patience, have forgiveness, and make something that works. So we're back to bottoms up. Bottom one comes up. So when you bend this, there really is like a gentleness that I was not employing. Kind of gently ease it down and then ease it under. And then one more cross. The bottom one comes down and the top one comes up. They make that lovely little X, and that's what we've got. So you can see there's green on both sides of this little tic-tac-toe board. There's a little green border. That's because the weavers, this is what the weavers are doing basically, is they're switching, going around a spoke and then switching again. And then they're going around another spoke and switching again and switching and switching. So there's a lot of wrapping up around the spokes. And that's what we see here. Started off, you only need to go around groups of 3 one time. So we just did that. We went around this group of 3, switch, then we did this group of 3 with a switch, then this group, switch, and then here and there are the 2 weavers ready to go. So as we go into our second lap, I'm going to start opening up the spokes. So we're actually going to bend these, and you don't want to hear a crack. Sometimes you can hear like a little sound of material releasing. Kind of open it up. Okay, you heard nothing, but that's good. What you don't want to hear is a quick snap. If you do ever break anything throughout the process of this basket, you can just pull it out and put a new piece in, and that's easier to explain in a class. And I don't know if I'm going to break anything and replace it, but suffice to say, you could just pull one of these out and put a new one in. Just feed it back in and it will be fine. But for now, here's what we're going to do. Open these up, and the same pattern with the weavers is going to continue all along, and you can start saying it to yourself. You can say, top one down, bottom one up. Go on to the next one. So what happens is the weaver that's on top goes inside the hole, and then you pick up the other weaver and bring it back up through. There was a little crack, so there was another little break. I'm going to do this other one quick before I show you again. We're going to open up this space, and the weavers switch places. The thick one goes down, and the little skinny one comes back up. And every time in between, those little X's. So those switches of the weavers are what's locking the thing in place. Switch. And here we're going from group to another group. We want to make a switch. Down and up. So every time you go in between a spoke, open this one up, top one down, bottom one up, and you go along. The middle one stays in the middle, so you don't have to bend it. But let's open this one up, and now top one goes down, and you pick up the bottom one and it comes up. Open it up. Now we got this thick one on top. It goes down, and I'm gonna release the thick one, pick up that skinny one, and bring it up. Top one down, bottom one up. Top one down, bottom one up. Top one down, bottom one up. All right, and now it's time to replace the weavers. So no more of that bending. That's just for the beginning when we bend one. What we're gonna do now is poke in replacement weavers the same way that the weavers ran out. This is called like backing in. So we're gonna back in the pokey end. Just try to feed it up through a hole if you can, like that. And then you can even tuck in the end here. Kind of just hook it in and get another one. This one's gonna be opposite that one. Okay, so the one that we just replaced, that I'm gonna actually cut the nub. I'm gonna cut this replacement nub. Now you can see the long skinny one that we just added, it went under the most recent spoke. So we need a weaver that goes over the spoke. So I'm going to poke this down through that hole. And then just like before, I'm going to hook it back up through the next hole. You could even do, maybe we'll do one more. Try to do one more poking through. Poke that through. Okay, so now we got two new skinny weavers coming out from behind that spoke, and we can go back to switching. The top one goes down and the bottom one comes up. Top one down, bottom one up. Top down, bottom up. All you have to do is make these switch places, and the pattern is the same every time. So they really are corkscrewing. And with these switches, always pull it in to the center of the basket. Pull it in, zoop, into the center, right? So you don't want these big spaces. You really want to make this as tight as you can. And you can adjust the spread of the spokes. You know, it looks like these two are a little close together. So I'm going to widen this and then use the weavers to lock it in. Every time you make a switch with those weavers, top one down, bottom one up, you're kind of locking in what you just did. So you can really bend these to be where you want to be and lock them in. Another thing to keep in mind as you're going along is how flat or bowed the basket is. So you can kind of pick these up or push them down, pick them up, and lock them in the same way. So if one of them, like this one, needs to be picked up a little bit, so I'm going to pick this one up and then use the locking of the weavers to pull it in tight and make sure that everything stays like a flat spider web. Down, up. Top one down, bottom one up. Top one down, bottom one up. Top one down, bottom one up. Now you can make this basket as big as you want to make it. I want you to notice that this basket is started the same exact way. So you can see there's 3 on 3. It's only 3 on 3. Same as this. This one, even the sheath is made the same way. This is like a really, this is a really small one. This one is 3 and 3 too. There's a lot of other things that you can do with bittersweet. You can do traditional twilling and randing and fitching. But I think that this basic twining is the most approachable for beginners and very versatile. This is definitely what I do the most of. The most basic bittersweet basket does not require you to do really anything else other than twining. And you can do a bunch of other different weaves, but I love this basket, and this basket is straight twined the whole way. So it's the same weave, over, under, inside, outside. The weavers switch places like your arms, snaking, corkscrewing. So you can turn up the spokes to start making the walls of the basket at any time. And sometimes I like to end the weavers and start new ones when I'm turning up the walls. But depending on how confident you are with your bending, you can use these weavers to help you turn up the walls. So the first thing that you want to do if you're going to get ready to turn it up is give everything a little pre-bend. So we're going to bend these spokes up in the same way that we bent them open. And you need to take care when you're doing this that you're moving really slowly, right? Again, remember, it's easy to just snap and crack, snap and break. But if this was the bottom of your basket and now you want to make it bend up, put your thumb there, give it something to brace against. Put your other fingers, remember, give pressure at the breaking point, because we all need a little bit of pressure, like a big hug, when we're about to snap. Just bend carefully up. There's another technique that I could try to show really quickly, traditionally done with the knife, but it's easy enough to do with the pruners, and it's not really required here, but it's called pricking up. And what you're going to do is take the pruner blade or the knife blade. It's nice if you can hold like a pencil grip, and try not to cut yourself. Probably shouldn't be poking sharp objects into the thigh, but I'll be really careful and I'll poke really softly. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the blade on the spoke, and as I pick up the spoke, I'm going to turn the blade, and it's going to remove a little bit of material and make a little hinge for the thing to bend against. So we put the blade there, pick it up, and turn the blade. And now, I don't know if you can see that little hinge. Parallel, and as I pick up the spoke, turn to perpendicular, and make that nice little hinge. So you want to give all your spokes a pre-bend, and the pricking up is really nice, but you can also just do it with your thumb. All of these have been given a pre-bend, and in the same way that we spread them open and held them in place with the locking weaver, now what we're going to do is we're going to push them up and then hold them in place with the locking weaver. So push it up, and now instead of top down, bottom up, we're doing outside, inside. So this weaver's on the outside, and it goes on the inside, and then we grab the one on the inside and bring it to the outside. And you can see that already that one is starting to turn up a little bit. So it's really important to push it, hold it tight to the inside as you lock it in with these weavings. So now we need to replace another one. We're going to replace this one. So we're going to follow the trajectory by poking this piece underneath, and then it's going to go back through, and now we have a new one on the inside. So when this one goes from the outside to the inside, we can grab this skinny one and bring it to the outside. Now we're replacing this thick one with this skinny one in my hand. So we're gonna match the path and back it in by poking it through a hole. The one that needs replacing went on the outside of the spoke, and so this one that's doing the replacing is also gonna go on the outside, and we're gonna tuck it back in a hole, poke it in, pull it tight, and now we got two new ones. So we can pick up the spoke and move from the outside to the inside, and move the one from the inside to the outside. And there's a bunch of different ways to hold this. You kind of need 6 hands, but you can see that if you pick it up, now I'm holding it with the forefinger. Now my right hand is holding a weaver that's forcing the spoke to stand up. So if I go slack with the right hand, the spoke falls down. If I tighten my hand, I can pick that spoke back up. So what I want to do is tighten the spoke up. Now I just need something to replace my right hand. Like I want to let my hand go. So I'm going to hold that weaver with my left finger, grab this other weaver, and that one is going to lock down what I just did with the right hand. I kind of lost some tension with the spoke, but you need to do a few laps before you really start seeing stuff stand up straight. But this is the pattern that you're going to say to yourself is either, depending on how you're holding it, I like to hold it where the base of the basket's against my belly and the spokes are kind of shooting straight out. So in this case, it still is top one down, bottom one up. But also, if you think about it, it's moving from the outside of the basket to the inside. Now my hand is inside the basket, and I'm going to grab this spoke that was on the inside and move it to the outside. So it's really important to have patience, because this material is not easy to work with. And I think that if we're learning anything from cutting bittersweet from a park near your house that was put there by some fool back in the past, while you're looking at this beautiful landscape and trying to make something that you're not even really sure you need anyway, because can't you just buy a pencil cup from Walmart anyway? You know, we're not really learning the things that we think we're learning. We're learning about our place in the world. We're learning about patience and time and humility and relationship, and we're learning how to talk to ourselves. I teach this class a lot. I see people get really frustrated really often. And we just have to remember that it's a process. It's a process. There's different ways to hold it. Now I'm kind of using my thigh as a table to make sure that it's all going the way I want it. And these are getting a little thick. So I'm just going to cut them and replace them the same way that it used to go. And if that's confusing for you, just tuck it in. Just put it in somewhere and secure it in a way that it's not going to come out. You got it. Good enough. Okay? So when you really get going up the walls, it can be as easy as now it's just taking the one on the outside, moving it around the spoke and back out. So we're going to take this one that's on the outside and we're just going to move it around that next spoke and then back out. So this one now is on the outside and it goes around a spoke and back out. Once you see the concept, it should be pretty easy. Remember, they're going around a spoke, switching, going around a spoke, switching. Imagine if I had longer fingers, switching. That's all that it is. I'm still working with my left hand. You know, the left hand isn't doing nothing. Like my right hand is the one that's maneuvering the weavers. So I'm picking up weavers and moving them. But the left hand is, you know, you can't see what's behind the left hand. It's all the work that I've just done. If I put my left hand there, it's visually blocking you from seeing what my left hand is doing. But what my left hand is doing is holding in place and pushing. See that, even just pushing down with my forefinger, pushing. And just holding the spoke with my thumb, I'm like pushing the spoke where it wants to be. So the left hand is almost molding as if the basket were made of clay, and the right hand is locking in with the weavers. Oops, a crack. So again, if stuff starts breaking, you might be able to just keep going because the bittersweet is really strong, and if it needs to be replaced, you know how to replace it. So I'm going to add in one more and then I'm just going to end it, because this is a small basket that we're making kind of out here for the purposes of education. And I want you to not necessarily copy exactly what I'm doing, but use these principles, apply them so that you can employ your own creativity to make a basket however big or whatever shape or for whatever function you want. So we're gonna finish this up. Okay, so now this one ended and we're gonna use this skinny one to wrap over it. So now the tension from the skinny one is holding down the thick one. And with this skinny one, we're just gonna poke it under the next row of weaving. and then cut it. If there's any other little nubs sticking out like this, you can trim that. Do a final trim at the end. If you want to make a handle, a really easy way to make a handle would be to just take two opposite spokes directly opposite each other and make them meet in the middle. So I'm just bending these so they make a little handle, and then I'm going to kind of wrap them around each other. Maybe I'm going to make the handle a little bit smaller. So this is kind of like if you've ever wrapped up, I think of it as like wrapping up guitar strings. Oh, that one broke, but around each other, that one got really messed up. But that's okay. When you get to the bottom, you can poke it. There's the end of the other spoke. It's wrapped all the way around, and we're going to poke it into the same hole. It's down next to the other spoke. And other side, the same thing. This one's pretty long. Cut it a little bit, and now it's going to go back down through that same hole. Now we're going to use the spokes to make the rim, and we just used up 2 spokes to make the handle. So before we go on, we're going to take 2 little ones, and these are going to be the replacements for the handle. So they go in next to the handle. Now we got a new handle spoke, and on the other side we're going to feed this in next to the handle. So this skinny green spoke, this skinny one that we just added, is going to go in front of the handle, bends down to the side, and it goes in front of the handle and in front of the next spoke to the right, and then it's going to go behind the third spoke and eventually back out. In front of 1, 2, behind 1, and back out. The next spoke is going to do the same thing. So we're going to carefully bend it to the side. As it's bending to the side, it's locking over the one that just bent. And it goes in front of the next 2 and behind 1. And then back out. So every spoke bends down and it goes in front of 1, 2, and then it goes behind the next one. So this one's going to bend down and it goes in front of 1, 2, and now it's going to go behind. Now we're at the handle, so this one goes behind the handle, and it's kind of long, so I'm trying to bend it to like poke it through, and I broke it. This is a very small little basket, and remember, this stuff is finicky and breakable, so I'm not really worried about it breaking. I'm just going to keep going with the pattern. So we got this next spoke right here is going to bend to the side, and it goes in front of 2, which is 1 spoke and handle, and then it goes behind the next one. This one, in front of 2, behind 1. This one bends down, in front of 2, behind 1. So a lot of this is like, wow, I tried to do something cool and I broke it, right? A lot of this is like, I tried and it's not perfect. And I think that that is okay, because I think that a lot of what we're doing is we're kind of fumbling our way through the darkness, trying to deal with, I mean, what we're dealing with is completely unprecedented. We've never had a civilization cover the planet and dump invasive species and chemicals and bullets everywhere. We've never had a global community of humans connected by something as powerful as the internet. We've never had the sixth largest mass extinction facing planet Earth have anything possibly connected to do with human activity. We've never faced these problems before. We've never had even the ability to remove bittersweet, invasive bittersweet, from this part of the world and make a little basket. We've never had to face these problems before. So the expectation that we're going to do everything perfectly is just ludicrous. We're not going to be able to get it perfect the first time. We're not going to be able to get it perfect maybe ever. But we're going to try our best. We're going to try the best that we can, as often as we can, whenever we got the energy, to take responsibility for the problems that are right where we're at, or what we can control, what we can affect. We're going to do what we can. And we're going to make something that works. So this is almost here. You know, we got one more spoke here. We're going to bend it down. It goes in front of two. And now what it's about is trying to feed it under the one that was already bent. See how weird that looks when you try to poke that through? And that's it, okay? This is a tiny little baby version of that. Now, if we were making a bigger basket, I would encourage you to keep bending all those radiating weavers, spokes which have become weavers. If this were a bigger basket, I'd say bend those and tuck those in. And that's how the border of this was made. All of those were tucked in and wrapped around, and you can see there's a little bit of a border, kind of a sloppy border, but a border nonetheless. What we're going to do in this case is we're just going to cut them. And that works too, because the fact that they're all tucked under each other, oh, there's one more to tuck under here. The fact that they're all tucked under each other means that they're not going to come out, like the basket is not going to unweave itself. It's pretty strong, and it's beautiful. So thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions, and good luck out there.